الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. مؤمنين and mu'minat, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this a blessed evening for all of us, allow us to be amongst those who seek forgiveness for ourselves and for our ancestors, inshallah, on this very special evening, Laylatul Jumu'ah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be amongst those who purify and do tazkiyah. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. Victorious is one who purifies his nafs, and one who does not is, in fact, وَالْعَيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, we seek refuge to God from being a loser, one who loses in their transaction of life. Life is a transaction in itself, and some people, they sell life of this world for akhirah, and some they do the opposite, and that's the worst thing that one could do. Selling the akhirah for this world is the worst transaction. So inshallah, we're amongst those who purify and prepare for our akhirah. As we approach the month of Ramadan, it's important to remember to prepare for the holy month of Ramadan, and by no means do I mean to refer to, or I'm not referring to or addressing the physical preparation in terms of getting your ingredients for your special foods or anything of that nature, rather preparing our souls, our nafs, for the journey of the holy month of Ramadan, to reach what is possible for us to reach, to get to the intended positions that are available through the month of Ramadan, through purification and ascension, gaining more and more taqwa in the holy month of Ramadan, inshaAllah. As usual, we try and cover some aspects of Islamic ethics on Thursday nights, although prior to the month of Sha'ban we were discussing or reflecting on the dua from Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, dua makarim al-akhlaq, the honorable levels or the honorable stages of ethics and morality from Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam. In the month of Sha'ban we try to reflect on this journey of purification through some of the supplications, specifically dua or salawat al-sha'baniyya and al-munajat al-sha'baniyya, the special munajat that is recommended in the month of Sha'ban. Last week I reflected or tried to discuss some aspects of this munajat, and inshallah this week also we will reflect on some other aspects of this munajat from Imam Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi afdalus salawati wa tahiyyat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One of the very, very important levels or important requests from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, du'as, things that we should ask God for in our supplications and invocations, is the spiritual purification. Unfortunately, many people they only know God when they are in difficulty in this world, in the physical journey of life in dunya. So they know God when they're going through some tough times, financially, health-wise, or otherwise, maybe safety and security. So you'll find, for instance, people who are living in troubled regions in the world are often turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they realize nobody else is there for them. And we know these days many of such people that they know the whole world has forsaken them, in a sense. And they realize that they only have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like Bani Israel, when they were in the hands of Pharaoh, subhanallah, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives different people the chance to go through these trials of life. So one day, Bani Israel, the Israelites, were in the land of the pharaohs, the Pharaoh, and they were in difficulties under the oppression and the dictatorship of Pharaoh, killing their children, boy children and keeping their girls alive to actually enslave them, to use them as slaves. And it was very tough that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَفِي ذَلِكُمْ بَلَاءٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ عَظِيمٌ. That is surely a very great trial and tribulation from your Lord. It is God who allows that as a trial. The oppressor, it's a trial for them in terms of power. How would they use the power? And the oppressed, how would they behave, or how would they react to being oppressed and being under oppression or under dictatorship, and whether or not they're going to be patient. Who do they turn to? Do they turn to the oppressor and give up their faith and their principles, or do they maintain their faith? And so these are different situations in life that people turn to God in such circumstances. However, how often do you find people turning to God saying, I'm not enjoying my prayers? Oh God, help me enjoy my prayers. How often do we find people turning to God saying, oh God, I want to get closer to you. I want to be more often remembering you. How often do we find people turning to God saying, oh God, I want to feel the urge to wake up at night and speak to you when people are asleep and worldly people are awake after their worldly pleasures and worldly temptations, and yet all I want is to have that seclusion with you. How often do we turn to God for such closeness to Him, qurb ilallah? We are meant to pray qurbatan ilallah. We are meant to fast qurbatan ilallah. We are meant to go to Hajj qurbatan ilallah. All of these things we say, the intention is to gain nearness. Qurbah is nearness, to get qareeb, to get closer, not in a physical sense, in the spiritual sense, to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the intention, or that is the wajib, the mandatory and obligatory intention that is meant to be for every act of worship, whether it be daily prayers or fasting or even Hajj or even any other act of worship. Even our wudu, our simple act of wudu, without the intention of qurbatan ilallah, nearness to God, is not valid. Even wudu and ghusl. So everything, in fact, a believer should get to a level where even their eating and drinking becomes with the intention of qurbatan ilallah, to gain nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how often do I feel troubled that I'm not near enough? That sometimes I am again slipping and committing some sins, and I am again backbiting here and there, being negligent of the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here and there, not putting God in the top list of my priorities. How often do we feel bad about that, and therefore we turn to God about fixing that situation? We do turn to God when we are desperate financially, when we're desperate health-wise. Doctors say no, there's nothing we can do. This is, it's out of our hands. In Farsi they say jawab mikana. The doctor says, I'm sorry, I can't do anything. Washes their hands, I can't do anything for you. That's when we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala desperately. And that's the call of the muttar. أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ. Often people think that this ayah is, they call it ayah of shifa, or dua shifa. It's not. Yes, you can use it in that situation for shifa, or in any desperate situation. It's the call of the desperate. Al-Muttar is one who is desperate. And the one who answers the Muttar is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know that in desperate times, we turn to Him in desperate times. So He is reminding us of that in one of the proofs of the presence of God. He says, in previous ayats, who created the heavens and the earth? أَمَّنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. In this ayah, أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَ. Then who is it that answers the call of the muttar? We turn to him as a muttar, as a desperate one. How many of us, how often do we feel muttar, do we feel desperate for spiritual gaining, or lacking for that matter? You know, if we feel that we're lacking spiritually, so we turn to him desperately and say, Ya Allah, help me. If we feel that we're lacking or we're not doing enough spiritually, we say, Ya Allah, help me gain more spirituality and more qurb to you. And that's what essentially the servant who knows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the core. Everything revolves around him and the oneness of God. His prophets and the imams after the prophets, all of his attributes, all of even this world and the hereafter, not just all of the creation. Al-awalim, meaning alamud dunya and akhirah, this world and the hereafter, and everything that you could imagine is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's all controlled by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How often do we turn to him and say, I was ignorant? In this dua, it's beautiful how in one part of the dua, the Imam Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam describes most of us in our youth, when we were younger, and we were negligent, we were ignorant. Because of certain temptations, we went away and far from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so he asks, and he in fact acknowledges the fact that we only came back when you woke us up to your love. One of the most beautiful lines in the dua. إِلَّا حِينَ أَيْقَظْتَنِي لِمَحَبَّتِكَ. I did not wake up, لم أستيقظ أيام اغتراري بك إلا حين أيقظتني لمحبتك. When I was ignorant and I used your forbearance and your forgiveness, I abused it against myself, and I did not wake up until you woke me up to your love, O Lord. إلا في حين أيقظتني لمحبتك. However you want me to be, I became. Acknowledging that not just in the physical world he is the sustainer, not just in the physical world he is the healer. هو الشافي. He is the healer. He is the sustainer. He is the giver. Everything is in his hands. Also, when we acknowledge that in the spiritual journey everything is from him, then we turn to him for spirituality. Before the month of Ramadan, we turn to him and say, Ya Allah, help us in this month of Ramadan. It's recommended in the last nights of the month of Sha'ban to recite the short dua. Allahumma illam takun ghafarta li fima mada min Sha'ban faghfir li fima baqiya min. My Lord, if you did not forgive me in the past days of Sha'ban, forgive me in the remaining days. In other words, I want to be forgiven, I want to be purified by you to deserve to be your guest in the holy month of Ramadan. Turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Realize that we can only turn or gain nearness to him through his love. إِلَّا حِينَ أَيْقَظْتَنِي لِمَحَبَّتِكَ. It is through your love and by your love that we are awakened and we can gain nearness to you, Ya Allah. Therefore, we ask you desperately, and that's how we should all be. That should be the state of a believer. That we are never negligent to not thank you enough. In the dua, the Imam says, Don't make me amongst those who undermine your commands. ممن يستخف بأمرك. Undermine your commands. أو يغفل عن شكرك, are ignorant and miss gratitude towards you and thankfulness to you. Those stages of ignorance and negligence, undermining your presence and your command, they in fact become obstacles to this spiritual journey of nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we want to gain, so we turn to Him desperately. We realize that during the month of Ramadan we are helped. Shayateen are chained, and we get help from God to gain qurb, nearness to Him. In the month of Ramadan, automatically people recite more Quran. Automatically they recite more dua. Automatically they are encouraged, or they are so blessed to fast. When you come during the year and you tell people it is so rewarding to fast on such a day, how many people actually make it? We all love to make it, but we know it's recommended. That's not the reason. We're not blessed enough and supported enough by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of our own lacking. Ultimately it comes back to us, that we don't get that special, we don't understand how special it is to do that fasting. In the month of Ramadan, most people are blessed to do that, to fast for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to pray, to recite more prayers, dua and supplications and invocations. We say, Ya Allah, help us to change to that better state in general in our lives. That does not become just the state in the month of Ramadan, but it becomes who we are and how we are. We become accustomed to that. I encourage mu'mineen and mu'minat to start a 40-day. Don't just make it the month of Ramadan. Do a 40-day of purification, of rising for sahar and dua, or pray salatul layl, salat before fajr time, and 40 days of purification, asking God every day, every one of those days, asking Him to help us ascend spiritually. Don't be happy and pleased with what we are and where we are. That would be the worst thing. Imam Ali alayhi salam, and I'll finish with this hadith. In a beautiful hadith, he says, رضاك عن نفسك فساد عقلك. To be pleased with yourself is the defect of your intellect. It's basically, I paraphrase it, it's the destruction of your intellect and your wisdom that it would be the biggest obstacle from you going further with what God has provided us, the intellect and the skills that He's provided us to get further and more pure, closer to Him than even the best of His angels. The barrier is to say, I'm okay. Being pleased with ourselves. Don't you ever let us all ask God desperately to not allow us to be basically in a state of complacency and being pleased with ourselves, that I'm good. Constantly be in a state of improving and purification and tazkiyah, asking God to help us in that, because we know it only happens through Him. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to purify in the remaining days of Sha'ban, help us prepare to be amongst His special guests in the holy month of Ramadan, and help us gain nearness to Him and maintain that nearness, that state of nearness to Him throughout the month and after the month of Ramadan. We ask him to make us amongst those who listen to what's said and follow what's best. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. If I may request all to recite Surah Al-Fatiha for all the marhumin, مع الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله.